Afghanistan, they're more lethal and destructive in terms of tearing apart military armored vehicles, and as a result killing more international security forces and as well as Afghan forces. Civilian casualties have been on the rise, unfortunately, because of high altitude air bombing by the coalition forces, because we don't have enough boots on the ground, and so they resort to air bombardment. Because the Taliban operate out of civilian areas, inevitably these bombs kill more civilians than the Taliban, which again, plays to the advantage of the Taliban by alienating people from the government and international security forces, and creating resentment among people against us. Solutions are, of course, to focus on human intelligence, to launch more commando attacks, and to stay in the area and where civilian casualties happen, apologize and provide assistance. These, unfortunately, have not happened much, and to the extent that not the Taliban have been gaining much from that. More on that, going through that. Narcotics is a problem of poverty, weak governance, and insecurity. It is a cause and effect, and here are some causes of why we are the largest producer of opium, poppy, and heroin in the world. Of course, we have limited law enforcement. Government is really weak. We're not present, particularly in the south and east. And now cultivation and production is now isolated to 5 southwestern provinces in Afghanistan. Judicial capacity is extremely weak. And more than important than all of those causes is global demand. Global demand is rising in Western Europe and North America, and as well as also in the region, in Russia and Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Central Europe, and Western Europe is the end market for Afghan drugs in Afghanistan. Fighting narcotics, these are the provinces that produce opium, poppy. We have gone from 13 drug-free provinces to 18 now, which we consider a success, and we should maintain that. We have those institutions, several institutions created to fight narcotics. But I always say that if we don't train them, equip them, and pay them, then they also become part of the drug business, unfortunately. Weak governance is another challenge in Afghanistan, and it's primarily because of weak judicial and police systems, which are the eyes and hands of any government and the world. That if you don't have those institutions effectively working with one another, then of course the government is not very legitimate, and that's corruption equals monopoly plus discretion minus accountability. That's what's ruling most of the institutions in Afghanistan. And narcotics, because of lots of money associated with it, is corrupting the government and institutions. Nonetheless, we're not the most corrupt government. It's a post-conflict government with meager resources, and yet there are more corrupt governments in the world. We hope that will change. And I was going to talk about, of course, parallel to the bond process, there was a security sector reform. I don't know how to back up. Maybe this one. Yes. Parallel to the bond process, this was the strategy that was adopted, a lead nation strategy for state building or nation building in Afghanistan. In most other post-conflict situations, as you may know from your research, the United Nations does the nation building in East Timor and Kosovo and Bosnia and all of those situations. In Afghanistan, they decided that these lead nations should take over those key and very challenging tasks. But unfortunately, with the exception of the United States, the rest have not followed through or not brought the level of resources and commitment needed to implement those important tasks and to strategically coordinate, because they're so interconnected and related, to make the impact that we need in terms of creating state institutions and enabling them to do their jobs, providing basic law and order and security across Afghanistan. Progress has been meager. I'll skip that. Here is the reason why that compared to other post-conflict societies, Afghanistan has received the least amount of aid both security and development per capita. That is now, of course, increased slightly and will increase, of course, with the new administration in the United States. But compared to other situations, we have received much less aid per capita. And here is a snapshot of how much other countries have received versus, particularly Iraq, versus Afghanistan. And much of what we have gotten has been spent on military operations. So there's some 20% of aid has been committed or devoted to reconstruction. Under reconstruction, everything falls, from judicial reform to human rights issues to governance and so on and so forth. There's so many things under reconstruction, but that's not enough for the the needs of Afghanistan. Some pledges in the recent Paris Donors Conference in France. We hope those pledges will be dispersed and be channeled through government institutions, so they will be coordinated to ensure aid effectiveness in Afghanistan. Just give you an example of how international aid is spent in Afghanistan. We don't get the resources. The resources go to NGOs and international contractors. Those are donor related. So they end up spending much of their money on their own services, on the people they recruit from abroad, on the expensive consultants. And as a result, our people get, say, under to $200 versus how much the Taliban pay. If you get a job with an NGO as a driver, you make more than what our engineer makes. So if you're an engineer, you have a large family to support, then you would ideally get a job with an NGO as a cook or a driver. That's basically wasting resources and, of course, not enabling the government to stand on its own feet. The cost of an international soldier is about $2,000 a day. Imagine how how many soldiers, Afghan soldiers, we can support and maintain with that amount if we Afghanize the security reform or sector in Afghanistan. Perceptions of corruption in Afghanistan. Everyone has paid bribe. Of course, I don't want to paid a bribe to get service. But the problem is dysfunctional corruption or big corruption tied to the drug dealing that needs to be fought. And the strategic coordination is another problem or challenge, which I just pointed out that it's good to have good consensus of those countries to be present in Afghanistan, but those countries, of course, bring lots of problems too, and they don't talk to each other, they don't work together, and so as a result, they waste a lot of resources by not doing so. Here's just a snapshot of PRT's provincial reconstruction teams in Afghanistan. Some are good, a lot of them are not, unfortunately. And this can be a presentation on it itself because they don't have the resources or they don't have the training and they don't connect with the local people and local state institutions to do their jobs effectively. So more or less they're there just for the sake of being there, not doing their jobs. And U.S., of course, PRTs are an exception because they are resourceful, they have good training, and they are working with the government and people of Afghanistan. Dangerous neighborhood is another challenge, of course. I pointed out Pakistan is a major problem, providing safe sanctuaries for the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. That's our #1 problem, security. If security is resolved, then the rest will be taken care of. But since the Taliban are provided a safe sanctuary,